Donald Trump is staring at the kind of trap he always insists only he can escape. One front runs through Ukraine where Vladimir Putin wants Western support weakened, delayed, or broken. The other front runs through the Middle East where any escalation involving Iran can rattle shipping lanes, spike oil prices, pressure markets, and put American forces at greater risk. Two theaters, one pressure machine. And whether every viral version of the story is literally accurate in every detail or not, the strategic logic behind it is very real. There is no verified public evidence for one neat cinematic Kremlin ultimatum in the exact form some online commentators describe. But the broader danger is even clearer than that. Moscow benefits if Washington gets more distracted in the Middle East while support for Ukraine frays and NATO unity cracks. That is not a side plot. That is the blueprint being rewired in real time. What changed is not just one headline. It is the collision of three forces at once, Russia and Iran growing closer. Trump continuing to attack allied structures he says America should lead. And markets remembering that war in one corridor can hit your wallet an ocean away. The stakes are not abstract. They touch alliance credibility, inflation, energy, military risk, and the architecture of the Western order itself. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what just happened, why Trump and his political movement keep misreading the board, and why the world you are living in today already looks different from the one most people thought they were living in a year ago. Let us rewind the clock. This did not begin with one dramatic interview or one spike in oil. It began when Trump made a habit of treating alliances like vending machines and autocrats like negotiating partners who just needed the right complement. He repeatedly cast NATO burden sharing as a shakedown. He openly questioned the reliability of collective defense. And in 2024, he said he would encourage Russia to do whatever it wanted to. Allies he considered delinquent on spending. That was not just campaign rhetoric. That was a signal heard in every foreign ministry across Europe. At the same time, Russia and Iran were not sitting still. After Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Moscow deepened practical military cooperation with Tehran. Western governments documented Iran supplying Russia with drones, and open-source reporting showed Russia moving toward local production tied to Iranian designs. That was the quiet part of the story. While public debate focused on outrage, these states were building habits of cooperation under sanctions pressure, shared enemies, shared workarounds, shared incentives. And that is the miscalculation at the center of Trump-style foreign policy. Trump assumes pressure is enough. Insult the ally, flatter the strongman, promise a deal, declare yourself the only adult in the room. But strategy is not theater. Strategy is position. It is logistics. It is institutions. It is who can keep functioning when the cameras move on. And while Trump was selling dominance, everyone else was drawing contingency maps. Receipt number 1, the Russia-Iran war pipeline. What exactly happened? After the Ukraine invasion, Russia and Iran moved from diplomatic alignment into something far more concrete, battlefield-relevant cooperation. The official language from both sides tends to sound sterile. Phrases like military technical cooperation, regional consultation, and resistance to unilateral sanctions. In plain language, it means two heavily sanctioned powers learned how to help sustain each other under pressure. Drones, production know-how, financial workarounds, political cover. Why is that strategically important? Because once a relationship shifts from polite diplomacy to wartime utility, it becomes leverage. Moscow does not simply walk away from useful leverage because Washington wants a cleaner news cycle. If Russia can use Iran-related instability to complicate American planning, divide Western attention, or raise the cost of U.S. commitments elsewhere, that tool stays on the table. Maybe not as one flashy blackmail note delivered in a movie scene, but structurally, yes, the leverage is real. And here's the punchline. Moscow was not building trust, it was building optionality. The whole fantasy that Putin can be peeled neatly away from Iran with personal chemistry and compliments ignores how the Kremlin actually operates. It banks pressure points. It does not surrender them for free. Receipt number 2, the NATO and Ukraine wedge. What exactly happened? Trump did not just criticize allies for defense spending. He made the core guarantee itself sound conditional and transactional. He repeatedly suggested America gets played by its allies. And he said out loud that he would encourage Russian aggression against certain NATO members. Around the same period, congressional Republicans delayed major Ukraine aid, while Trump aligned himself more and more with a narrative of fatigue, grievance, and suspicion toward existing alliance commitments. The official language from Trump world is usually fairness, burden sharing, peace through strength, America first. In plain language, allies heard something else. They heard that the most powerful member of the alliance might not treat the alliance as sacred. They heard that support for Ukraine could become a bargaining chip. They heard that the old assumption America is difficult, but ultimately dependable, could no longer be taken for granted. Why does that matter? Because once European capitals start asking whether Washington is still the unquestioned axis, they do not wait for a final collapse. They start preparing more domestic defense spending, more talk of strategic autonomy, more joint procurement, more hedging, more planning for a world in which the American umbrella is still large, but no longer unconditional. And here's the punchline: while Trump was building grievance, others were building backups. That silence was deafening. Receipt number 3, the Middle East shock channel, what exactly happened across 2023 and 2024. The region saw a dangerous mix of escalation, attacks tied to Iran-aligned groups, pressure on shipping, and a direct Iran-Israel exchange that reminded markets and militaries just how close the Gulf can get to the center of the global economy. The United States responded with deterrence deployments, force protection measures, naval assets, and repeated warnings about regional escalation. The official language was de-escalation, deterrence, and protection of commerce and personnel. In plain language, once the Strait of Hormuz, the Red Sea, tanker insurance, missile ranges, and force protection start dominating the map, your grocery bill is already in the room. So is your gas bill. So are airline costs, shipping costs, trucking costs, and farm input costs. If energy jumps, fertilizer gets more expensive. If shipping insurance jumps, goods cost more. If inflation expectations move, interest rate relief gets harder. And here's the punchline. The market does not care about macho rhetoric. It prices risk fast. If this story is connecting dots you have not seen assembled anywhere else, then you are already ahead of most people watching this unfold in fragments. Hit subscribe right now. This is moving faster than any single outlet can track, and you need to be here when the next piece drops. Now step back and look at the contrast. Most politicians, when challenged, get louder. They throw another insult. They post another clip. They mistake heat for control. The Kremlin does something more dangerous. It cross-wires theaters. Ukraine talks to energy. Energy talks to inflation. Inflation talks to elections. Iran talks to shipping. Shipping talks to alliance cohesion. Sanctions talk to technology transfers. It is cold. It is ruthless, and it is designed to make every crisis more useful than the crisis itself. That is the strategist side of this equation. And I use that word descriptively, not admiringly. Putin does not need a clean victory everywhere. He needs a messy board where every Western choice carries a second cost. He leaned on energy. He deepened ties with Iran. He waited for American political dysfunction. He tested NATO nerves. He exploited war fatigue. He kept stacking leverage points until one theater could be used to pressure another. Trump is the blunt actor in this story. He obsesses over image, pressure, loyalty tests, instant dominance, and grievance. He attacks NATO while claiming to save it. He treats support for Ukraine like a domestic culture war prop. He talks as if deterrence can be replaced by personal chemistry with men who have spent decades studying how to manipulate uncertainty. He did not build a resilient network. He performed strength inside one. And here's the lesson. You do not beat a trap like that by flattering the person who built it. You do not steady a crumbling structure by kicking your own load-bearing walls. So what does this actually mean for you? It means geopolitics is no longer something happening over there. If you drive to work, run a small business, buy groceries, heat your home, manage payroll, work in manufacturing, fly for work, or farm for a living, you are already inside the blast radius of these decisions. Higher oil means higher transport costs. Higher transport costs feed into food, retail, and construction. Shipping disruptions ripple into inventories. Insurance costs rise quietly and then show up everywhere. Fertilizer follows energy. So do parts of the chemical chain. If rate cuts get delayed because inflation risk reappears, mortgages, credit card balances, and business loans stay painful longer. And there's another layer people miss. Once companies reroute supply chains or diversify energy sourcing around a new reality, they do not simply flip back because politicians change their tone. The contracts move, the warehousing moves, the investment moves. The jobs follow the new routes, and they do not always come back. This is also why critics keep hammering the constitutional side of the story. War powers, tariff powers, emergency authorities, budget priorities. All of it matters more when executive improvisation collides with fragile markets and live military commitments. You cannot run a superpower like a reality show cliffhanger and expect families, troops, and allies to absorb the volatility for free. So, where does this go next? I see 3 plausible scenarios. Scenario 1, the managed reset business pressure, Pentagon caution, allied diplomacy, and market reality force a cool down. The Gulf stays tense, but major escalation is avoided. Shipping lanes remain risky, yet still open. Ukraine support continues in some form, even if more slowly and more bitterly debated. Everyone claims a symbolic win. Nobody gets everything they wanted. But even in this calmer version, the structural changes remain. Europe keeps looking for more strategic independence. Gulf states keep hedging. Russia and Iran keep channels open. The temperature drops. The trust does not fully come back. Scenario 2, the domino realignment. More middle powers decide that depending too heavily on one unpredictable center is too dangerous. Europe accelerates defense coordination. Regional powers diversify security ties. Energy buyers and shippers build more redundancy. Technology and finance pathways keep adapting around sanctions, risk, and political uncertainty. The United States is still enormous in this scenario, still powerful, still central. But it is no longer the unquestioned axis of every calculation. Alternatives built in crisis become permanent roads. That is how orders change. Not all at once, but one bypass at a time. Scenario 3, the spiral. This is the one nobody likes to name out loud. More attacks, more retaliation, more shipping pressure, more oil shocks, more alliance strain. A U.S. political class that cannot agree on war, peace, trade, or deterrence. A Kremlin that keeps probing weakness. An Iran file that never really cools. A Ukraine file that becomes a bargaining chip in domestic politics. In that world, escalation does not need to become world war to do deep damage. It just needs to remain expensive, ambiguous, and politically poisonous for long enough. That is enough to fracture decision-making, erode trust, and normalize permanent instability. And that brings us to the final frame. The relationship between American power, European confidence, Russian opportunism, and Middle East risk will not be the same after this period, no matter who wins the next election or what slogan comes next. Even if personalities change tomorrow, the lesson has already been learned by allies, rivals, investors, and institutions. Never put all your strategic eggs in one basket. Once alternatives are built, they do not vanish. They become the new normal. Trump did not invent every pressure point on this board, but he has repeatedly made them easier to exploit by treating alliances as disposable, institutions as annoyances, and strongman politics as a substitute for strategy. Putin did not create every American weakness either, but he has shown again and again that he is very good at using them. So, here are the big questions. Did Putin outmaneuver Trump, or did Trump hand him the tools? Is Europe hedging because it is disloyal or because it would be reckless not to? And if every crisis is now wired into every other crisis, is a clean reset even possible? Or are we already living inside the restructure? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe because the next chapter, NATO burden sharing, Ukraine aid politics, Gulf escalation risk, and the inflation fallout from all of it is coming fast. This story is not slowing down. Do not look away. This content is commentary and analysis for informational purposes only. It does not constitute financial, legal, military, or geopolitical advice. The views expressed represent the analytical perspective of the narrator based on publicly available reporting and should not be taken as established fact. Events remain uncertain or contested. Consult qualified experts before making any decisions based on geopolitical developments.